Good afternoon, everybody. Are you having a good time so far? Good. Most of you don't know who I am, so you're going to have to take my word for it when I tell you that I'm the world's only Thai-American playwright. And if you don't believe me, I challenge you to find another one. And if you do find another one, by chance, then shut up and keep it to yourself, because I've built my entire career on this claim. Now, what you do know just by looking at me is that I have a very compact build. Most of you could probably pick me up with one hand and shake me until candy comes out of my ass. And a friend of mine rifled through my shirts and pants one time and called them doll clothes because they're so small. So it's always been a real challenge for me to find clothes that fit me properly. Stores don't want to seem to stock things in my size. And I've noticed that as the decades have progressed, clothes marked small have gradually gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. Have you noticed this? A small today is not the same size small as it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So, out of fashion necessity, most of my adult life, I have had to spend lots of time in vintage clothing stores where everything smells like feet. And I've also had to shop in the boys section at Target, which makes me seem not only like a pervert, but like a cheap pervert. But about 10 years ago, I made an important discovery. At this time, I had been commissioned to write a new play for 8th graders to perform at a fancy private school in San Francisco. And when I use the word fancy, I'm not exaggerating. The cost of putting your kid just through kindergarten at the school was about $20,000, which incidentally cost more than my entire college education. I'm not kidding. The school must have had some really expensive finger paints. Working with these 13 and 14-year-olds, I began to notice something, and it's not an exaggeration to say that these teenagers changed my life. And no, this is not one of those inspirational teacher talks. I have never saved an inner-city school child. What I began to notice was that a lot of these teenagers had the same build that I had. And they looked like they had clothes that would fit me. And I found out that many of them shopped at a place called Hot Topic. For those of you who don't know, Hot Topic stores can be found in shopping malls all across the United States. It's full of music-related and pop culture-related clothing and accessories. And it is a clothing paradise for American teenagers. And because of Hot Topic, I was able to start shopping for clothes like normal people in malls. And I love malls. So you could frequently see me at Hot Topic running for the sale rack and accidentally knocking over 13-year-old Vietnamese girls into the charm bracelets. So for these 8th graders, I wrote a new play that was about an apartment building that was going to be torn down because the property owners wanted to build a 10-story Starbucks coffee. And the usually apathetic neighborhood bands together, and in the end, they save the apartment building after mobilizing politically. Now, the kids really loved working on this script, and it was great for them to experience a piece of theater that was very contemporary because, you know, most of them were used to performing in old musicals and classic plays that many of them had a hard time connecting with and that many of the parents had to suffer through. I mean, have you ever seen a bunch of 8th graders perform a Shakespearean tragedy? It is like a waking nightmare. Well, a couple of weeks into rehearsal, I was very somberly informed that the parents of one of the students were upset with the script. And they had been in touch with the school administration, and there was a lot of behind-the-scenes controversy going on. And these weren't just any parents. These parents sat on many school committees, and they were one of the school's largest financial donors and helped to keep the school's financial aid program afloat. And not only that, these parents also belonged to the company that owned and operated a huge corporation. And no, it wasn't Starbucks or Hot Topic, because that would have been too coincidental, but it was an American multinational clothing retailer that happens to be the largest one in the United States. Now, I'm not going to say the name of this company, because who knows, they might have secret agents that will sneak into my house and burn all my Hot Topic clothes, so I'm not going to risk it. By the way, I forgot to tell you the title of this talk. The title of this talk is actually inspired by these subway station signs that you see around the world that say, "Mind the Gap." So that happens to be the title of this talk, Mind the Gap. What does that have to do with anything? Nothing. I just like the sound of it. Mind the Gap. Apparently, these parents were very concerned about the negative depiction of corporations in the play, and they wanted me to change the ending so that a corporation would come in and save the apartment building at the end, thereby rendering obsolete my themes of individual responsibility and the power of community. Yeah, somehow my little play was apparently seen as some kind of socialist manifesto. The music teacher who had spearheaded the project told me that I had a choice. I could either change the script to put corporations in a more positive light, thereby preserving the school's relationship with these very influential parents and with this very powerful company, or I could leave the script as is and put the entire school's future in danger, particularly the financial aid program, which gave low-income students an opportunity to attend this prestigious institution. And the music teacher said that he would stand by any decision that I made. Folks, this was like a theatrical Sophies Choice. I really had to think this thing through. I mean, first of all, I am the kind of guy who doesn't like any kind of confrontation at all. Like, if somebody cuts in front of me in line somewhere, I will totally pretend that I don't notice. And if the people behind me get agitated, I'll just drop my things and leave. Second of all, I am not the kind of writer who has deep personal philosophies about the sacredness of my art, especially not for this project. This project was for a bunch of 13-year-olds. This project was for a bunch of kids, the kind of kids who cut in front of me at Hot Topic. Who gives a crap? But then I remembered something that Virginia Woolf once wrote. So long as you write what you wish to write, that is all that matters. But to sacrifice a hair on the head of your vision in deference to some headmaster with a silver pot in his hand, or to some professor with a measuring rod up his sleeve, is the most abject treachery. And that's a great quote. But then I remembered that Virginia Woolf was mentally ill and drowned herself in a river. I'm not going to use her as a role model. But then I remembered something that Alexander Hamilton once said. Those who stand for nothing fall for anything. And that is a great quote. But then I remembered that Alexander Hamilton had anger management issues and died stupidly in a duel and left his wife and 7 children saddled in debt. I'm not going to use him as a role model either. So my natural curiosity as a writer compelled me to do a little bit of research on this company. And what I found at the time was a lot of information about the company's rather dubious sweatshop practices in foreign countries, and their plans to implement logging operations in ancient redwood forests. And that reminded me of something I once read. It is better to live one day as a lion than 100 years as a sheep. And that is a great quote. But then I remembered the person who said that was Benito Mussolini. So I continued to wrestle with this dilemma, and I decided to actually visit one of the company's stores to see if I could get a better feel for the store and the company and the family and the vibe of the place. And after visiting this store on a warm night in late spring, I finally knew what I had to do. I went home and I emailed the music teacher, and I told him that I was not going to change a single word. The parents yanked their child from her role of playing one of the evil property owners and had her recast in a minor role, and my play was performed exactly as I wrote it. And it turned out to be a huge success. A lot of the parents really, really loved it, and some of the students said that it was the best experience that they had had during their entire time at that school. But I waited. I waited for the wrath that would surely come. To my surprise, there were no significant repercussions from the production, and the school is still running as strong as ever, and kindergarten is still $20,000. In fact, I just actually looked up the current tuition. It's actually now $26,000. It's finger paint inflation. And even though the company has really cleaned up its act over the last decade or so, I still, to this day, boycott all of the stores owned and operated by this company. Now, most people, of course, see my boycott as a triumphant and inspirational act of political protest. But as I learned from my final visit to that store during that warm night in late spring, and as you all now know, they don't have anything that frickin' fits me. Thank you very much.